there is everything Maoist about this institute. Confucius was an ancient Chinese philosopher who promoted kindness and morality. Mao was the founder of the Chinese Communist Party who genocided 60 million people. So I ask you, which of the two Chinese philosophers should have their name above this door? Well, of course, it's Mao. The modern CCCP is every bit as genocidal as the CCCP set up by Mao. But you see, in 2004, this institute was set up to be the party propaganda ministry of the Chinese Communist Party. In 2007, the chief executive of the Chinese Communist Party propaganda wing called this institute a vital part of the CCCP war strategy of soft power. The chief executive officer said that this institute would be used to expand China's influence around the world. So you see, this is why they call it a Confucius Institute. It is far easier to sell the philosophy of Confucius to the soft-minded liberal students that are pandered to on campuses all over the world, rather than the philosophy of Mao. Besides, one of the main goals of this institute is propaganda in favor of the genocidal Chinese Communist Party. So it would kind of give the game away if they put the name of the founder of the genocidal Communist Party above the door, Mr. Mao Tse Dung, over the door. So I propose that we refer to this institute as the Dung Institute. I want to see the words Dung Institute over the door. You can see it there already. In 2019, Sweden became the first European country to remove these Dung institutes from their country. Why? Spying and propaganda. It turns out that the Dung Institute in Sweden had infiltrated the engineering department at a Swedish university and were stealing intellectual property. They also found that the Dung Institute in Sweden was stopping free speech and academic discussion. So the Swedish very sensibly kicked them out of their country. This year, the Americans started to do the same. Why? Spying and propaganda. The Americans found that the Dung Institutes were financing protesters against Republican ideals and stealing research and development from the American university. So the Americans very sensibly kicked them out. The Australians are in the process of kicking the Dung Institutes out of their country. Why? You guessed it. Spying and propaganda. The Australian government found that the Dung Institutes were trying to curtail the academic freedoms and were working against the Australian interests. The Canadian government is removing the Dung Institutes from Canada. Why? Spying and propaganda. A representative of the largest school board in Canada said that the Dung Institutes were brainwashing their children, and the security services of the Dung Institutes were attacking Canadian businesses and using Canada's border with America to attack America. The list goes on and on. The Bavarian government is kicking out the Dung Institute. The Indian government is kicking out the Dung Institutes. It just goes on and on. The reasons are always the same: spying and propaganda. So I have a question for the communists that took over UCG all those years ago. Why do you insist on inviting CCCP operatives and their spies to our beautiful homeland? If you are so eager to give away the fantastic research and development that NUIG produces, would it not be easier to just put it in an email and send it over to Beijing? I suspect that the communists in NUIG won't do that. Because firstly, international communism doesn't just want to destroy the economy of this beautiful republic. No, because the goals of international communism go far beyond that. The communists of NUIG failed recently to introduce a social credit system at NUIG. And if it wasn't for the Burkes family, they would have introduced that system. So thank you to the Burkes. So the communists...
Well done, the Burkes. Well done, the Burkes.
The communists of NUIG realised they needed help from professionals. They needed the help of the CCP. to indoctrinate students and locals with their brand of genocidal communism. In return, the communists in NUIG are happy to provide CCP with the headquarters for their spies to pressure and silence Chinese dissidents who have come to Ireland to free the genocidal Chinese Communist Party. The communists in NUIG are happy to provide the Chinese Communist Party with a facility to propagandize the Irish people about COVID-19. I mean, what else could we be witnessing here? What else could this be? Multiple intelligence agencies around the world have told us that the Chinese Communist Party lied about the numbers of deaths being caused by the Wuhan virus. It wasn't until after the COVID-19 virus had shown up in several other countries that the CCP was forced to admit they were lying. Some of these intelligence agencies pointed out that while China was lying about the numbers of deaths that were being caused by the coronavirus, they were buying up masks and gloves and PPE around the world. These intelligence agencies told us that while China was lying about the numbers of deaths caused by the China virus, they were allowing thousands of people to fly around the world. But now we're supposed to believe that this Institute of Dung here is supposed to help the Irish people with the virus that the very philosophy of Dung himself unleashed on the world. This is madness. The Irish people are a trusting and welcoming people, but we are not fools, and we are not buying your propaganda anymore, dungheads. Their virus and their lies genocided our Irish elderly and vulnerable, and there will be reparations. The Chinese Communist Party uses slave labour of ethnic and religious minorities to produce goods. Yet where are people before profit and Antifa? They should be here protesting this pile of dung of an institute. But they're at home wearing their Nikes and their iPhones, slagging us, the people that are here standing up to this vicious regime. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is one of the worst polluters in the world. Yet where are the environmentalists protesting outside this Maoist institute for bullshit? They are off driving their hybrid vehicles, waiting to bury their lithium-ion batteries in the ground in China. We know that the Chinese Communist Party are genociding the Muslims in China because British lawmakers are being forced by British Muslims to recognise that genocide. Where are the Irish Muslims forcing NUIG to recognise that same genocide? Why aren't Irish Muslims outside these Maoist institutes protesting the genocide of their Islamic brothers and sisters? Shame on the good members of that Muslim community for not protesting these genociders. Shame on them. Shame. The UNHCR tells us that the Chinese Communist Party is mutilating political prisoners in $1 billion a year organ harvesting industry. Yet where are Sinn Féin today? Their supporters have been political prisoners. They should be here today. No, they are too busy promoting policies to tell Irish children with well-formed genitalia that they need to mutilate those genitalia because of a transgender ideology that they have. And the Irish Medical Organisation are allowing the organ harvesting CCCP to conduct testing here on Irish people. Does the Irish medical establishment intend to allow the Chinese Communist Party use the DNA they have gathered here to complete lists for the organ harvesting of the Irish people? Oh no? You don't think so? Well, think about it for a second. It was only a couple of years ago that the Irish medical establishment allowed a change to the organ donation laws. That means your organs can be harvested without your consent or the consent of your family. And then this year, lo and behold, the chief regime of organ harvesting shows up with the backing of the Irish medical establishment with a test to help you for the good of the people. The reason why none of the groups that I have mentioned here are here now is because of silver. It's because of money. International communism funds these groups so that they can control these groups. They set up these groups to mop up and control the well-intentioned but weak-minded people in our Western republics. These groups then control the efforts of the well-intentioned but weak-minded among us, so that those people who are genuinely concerned about genocide, slavery, racism, religious discrimination are distracted by red herrings. That's why none of these groups I mentioned earlier are here today. That's why when you go home, you will see on social media that those very groups are slagging those of us that are showed up here today to tackle the worst human rights abusers in the world. It's because they are controlled by the worst human rights abusers in history, international communism. We, the free people of the republics of the world, demand academic freedom for our children. We say to those communists that control our institutions, we don't want your radical sex education. We demand the atrocities of communism are taught in our schools and universities. We don't want you teaching our children who have normal genitals that it's a good idea to mutilate their genitals because you have an ideology. And we don't want you providing a place for the worst mutilators in the world to propagandize our children. We say to those communists, the label made in China is the label of butchers. It is the label of genociders. It is the label of slave drivers. We need to boycott and divest from the Made in China label. I say to the communists at NUIG, why do you side with the genocidal butcher again? Why do you side with the slave drivers again? Why do you side with the concentration camps again? Why do you bring their spies into our country? Why did you give them a place among us to spout their vicious lies and propaganda? Was it greed? Was it silver? For what died the sons of Roshin? Was it fame? For what died the sons of Roshin? Was it fame? For what flowed Ireland's blood in rivers that began when Brian chased the Dane, and did not cease, nor has not ceased, with the brave sons of 16? For what died the sons of Roshin? Was it fame? For what died the sons of Roshin? Was it greed?